Now, it's one thing to start stoking the "you were wronged," but if you simultaneously you start adding another rational belief, which is you deserve the best. There's something special about you. So it's even worse that you were wronged. Our ego wants to hear this kind of thing. Our ego wants to hear that indeed, yeah, we are not only were we wronged, but we deserve better. We deserve reparations. We deserve someone else should give us something. So I think that's also where the entitlement comes in. Yeah, people were wronged. And now what do we do? Well, now somebody else should give me something that I want. And if I'm entitled to it, I think then we start in psychology, we start, putting the other person or putting ourselves in the child mode, sort of the rebel of, yeah, I want plenty of things without having to deserve them. Or I've deserved it because I've suffered. Maybe there's also an element where that might bring some sort of not meaning or justification for the suffering. Like the suffering was worth it if I can get something out of it.
Yeah, like a balancing or like a rectification of it, because it's like this is the pain that I went through, so therefore, this these spoils or whatever I'm
Mhm.
kind of feeling entitled for is going to, I guess, pay off the debt of the suffering that I was put in.
Yeah, I think there's something about that. I think it taps into the longing we have for fairness and this idea that fairness exists or should exist. And it's so easy to sell that on people, especially if you tell people what happened to you was unfair. Well, we can identify with that. But it was unfair, but it was especially unfair. Well, we sort of like that because, yeah, it's you're making it hurt even more, which justifies even more the childish response. And in order to make it fair, you should be getting something massive. Well, we want something massive. So I think as soon as we give into the resentment and the notion of fairness and the entitlement, we're basically opening the doors to being manipulated by anyone who's deranged enough to want to do that. But it makes it so easy. It's sort of we want someone to come to us and lie to us. Because the alternative is just saying, well, life can be really difficult and things can be very unpleasant. The notion of fairness is not helpful as a framework. It makes you vulnerable. I understand it, but from a childish point of view, as an adult, there's no fairness. You go walking in Kenya, go through a safari and see if lions believe in fairness. They don't.
No.
They're facts. Fairness is a nice construct we've made to make it easier to live together as a people. Absolutely. But one person's fair is another person's unfair. So who's right? You
Exactly.
know, if we go picking apples and you pick six and I pick one, well, is it fair? Well, maybe I'm more hungry than you are. Maybe you want to give me some. But then it's about trade and working it out. If you're alone and I have a family of six and you keep all the apples for yourself, when you want something, I might not give you something. So then it's about compromise and collaboration and working together and thinking in the long term. But if I just want your apples, I'll claim that it's unfair. But you might say, well, I've been picking apples and you've been having a nap. So how is that fair? So one person's fair is another person's unfair. Um,
Exactly.
and that's where it gets
100%.
that's where it gets scary. We can always justify it. So whenever I hear people talk about fairness or try to rebalance an unfair state of affairs, I understand it. And those people are really vulnerable to being manipulated by whoever tells them what they want to hear.
Yes, and I think that's the key point, especially with getting involved in narcissistic relationships, is that, when a person is walking around in like an unhappy state, or they do feel like that they've been wronged, or they have like a negative self-image, or they have an identity issue, they're really not really happy in their own skin, then, as you're saying, there's, a huge risk and they become a target of the narcissistic person that's scanning different peoples to see who's really looking for something great, and the narcissist will certainly start out by offering that,
Yeah.
and if a person's looking for that or really wanting to escape something, then there's a high likelihood that they're going to maybe fall into that.
Have you seen anything going back to childhood when people had relationships with narcissists that growing up they didn't have a lot of recognition or validation from the parents, or they didn't feel safe, or they always felt like they had to prove something, or they were never enough, or the parents didn't really see them, or they were neglected. Do you see any patterns there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the emotional neglect in childhood and not being seen, I mean, is this is a very big target for the narcissist, because the narcissist doesn't actually see you. They never look at you. They never validate you. They only, I guess, get you to really to fall in love with yourself. And that's what's very addictive about the narcissistic relationship. But that's kind of very reminiscent and familiar of that childhood relationship where the parents are there, and I love my parents, but they're not really seeing me. And that kind of familiarity with the narcissist, the narcissist never sees you because they're kind of stuck in their own world. So it does breed a certain familiarity, and it does cause I guess, an unconscious, I guess, comfort with what the narcissist is offering in terms of, the relationship style. It does breed similarities. Yeah. So